Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly,
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether
All
he
I
took the money?
know is that
Something behind, and I'm going to yield back. Thank you.
Senator Tillis. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Attorney General Bondi, at your confirmation hearing in January, made a clear commitment you would not politicize your position. We are here today at your first oversight hearing 9 months into your tenure, at a time when hundreds of career prosecutors have quit because they were required to take unethical actions at odds with that promise, or feared that they would have to take such actions if they remained on the job. When over 1,000 former federal prosecutors have sounded the alarm about the unprecedented degree to which the powers of DOJ are being abused to go after the president's enemies. I approach this hearing with a heavy heart. As a former federal prosecutor myself, I served in a department that, whether it was under a Democratic or Republican president, would never use the office to go after the president's enemies or to hide the corruption of his friends. But today, the Justice Department has been used to cover up the possible corruption of the mayor of New York or of a high-level administration official taking $50,000 reportedly in cash in a bag, or a child sex predator who befriended the president and some of his cabinet members. And instead of preventing partisan weaponization, your department has engaged in a brazenly political prosecution at the president's explicit direction. The department has become President Trump's personal sword and shield to go after his ever-growing list of political enemies and to protect himself, his allies, and associates. My questions therefore focus on these two themes: hiding the corrupt acts of his friends and prioritizing the political prosecution of his enemies. So let me start with the shocking allegations of bribery and pay to play. 2 weeks ago, 4 major media outlets reported that Tom Homan, the president's top deportation official working in the White House, took $50,000 in cash in a bag from undercover FBI agents in September 2024, just over a year ago. According to these reports, Homan indicated he would facilitate securing contracts in exchange for money once he was in office in a future Trump administration. Reportedly, this exchange was caught on tape. Rather than pursue this investigation without fear or favor, the department and the FBI under your leadership or that of your predecessor before you confirmed quietly shut it down. Once news broke, your deputy and FBI director issued a joint public statement confirming that the Trump administration closed the investigation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Homan took the $50,000, telling a reporter, quote, "Mr. Homan never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight." So today, I hope you can help us get our facts straight. Was that true, what the White House press secretary said when she denied Homan took the money? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, as I stated earlier, I was not in office. I was not confirmed when that was handled.
So does that mean
Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Director Patel said that there was no evidence that Tom Homan committed a crime. Yet now you're putting his picture up to slander him.
No, I'm putting his picture up showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question, did he take the money?
Here's the truth that should make all of us sit up. Oversight isn't theater. It's how a democracy checks the people who hold the most power. What we just watched wasn't a clash of personalities. It was a stress test on the Justice Department's independence. Senator Adam Schiff asked clear, specific questions about ethics reviews, prosecutorial departures, and an alleged $50,000 cash handoff involving a senior official. The Attorney General didn't just decline to answer. She pivoted, personalized, and reframed the moment as a loyalty test to Donald Trump. That's the tell. When facts are inconvenient, power tries to turn scrutiny into a grievance. Let's slow this down and make sense of the stakes. In the modern era, post-Watergate, attorneys general are expected to operate at arm's length from the White House. That's not a courtesy. It's a constitutional norm designed to prevent the president from using prosecution as a weapon and non-prosecution as a favor. When Schiff lists out questions the AG refused to answer, about ethics sign-offs, about who ordered names flagged in case files, about whether a videotape or audio tape of a cash exchange exists, he's mapping a pattern. The substitution of loyalty for law, PR for process, and deflection for disclosure. This hearing also taught a civic lesson many people never get in school. Congress's oversight power isn't optional for the executive branch. If the Attorney General thinks she can't answer, there are legitimate, narrow reasons, ongoing investigations, classified matters, explicit privilege. But those aren't magic words. They must be invoked clearly, justified specifically, and often followed by accommodations, in-camera reviews, redactions, Inspector General referral, or a document production schedule. What we saw wasn't that. We saw the non-answer masquerading as an answer, then the detour. Will you apologize to Donald Trump? That's not a legal doctrine. It's a rhetorical device, shifting from the public's right to know to a demand for personal vindication. Let's unpack the alleged bribe scenario, because it illustrates how accountability should work when systems are healthy. If there's a recording of a senior official accepting cash, you do 4 things. Preserve the evidence, remove anyone with conflicts from the chain of command, assign career prosecutors or a special counsel to avoid political influence, and create a traceable disclosure path, briefings to the Gang of 8 or the relevant committees, plus an Inspector General audit trail. None of those steps require prejudging guilt. All of them signal that the facts, not the factions, will decide the outcome. When instead, the public hears there's no case without a transparent process or a readiness to show Congress the underlying evidence, trust erodes. And trust in the justice system isn't an abstraction. It's the only reason subpoenas are obeyed, verdicts are accepted, and peaceful transfers of power are possible. Another quiet lesson in this hearing was about institutional brain drain. Schiff referenced waves of career prosecutors resigning or being pushed out. That's not just a staffing story, it's a capacity story. Career officials carry the department's memory, how to run complex conspiracies, how to wall off tainted evidence, which precedents keep national security cases on solid footing. If you replace that infrastructure with political loyalists, you don't just skew priorities, you hollow out competence. That's how democracies end up with flashy press conferences and flimsy indictments, or with obvious cases mysteriously shelved.
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly,
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did, but in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as
I understand,
Attorney
but do you
General.
know?
I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether
All
he
I
took the
know
money?
is that-
Or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
you
were
have a
asked,
law degree,
excuse
Senator
me,
Schiff?
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of any trust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your
You can
entire
attack me later,
career.
and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day to day.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be...
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair. I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president.
There was also a legal culture cue worth naming, the conflation of criticism with slander. Oversight isn't defamation. Pointed questions aren't persecution. In a constitutional system, public officials don't receive immunity from tough scrutiny. They earn credibility by surviving it, by producing documents, by owning decisions, by letting evidence speak louder than spin. When an attorney general meets a document request with a counteraccusation, they're not protecting an investigation. They're protecting a narrative. From a democratic perspective, This is where values meet process. Equal justice under law requires more than the right statutes. It requires visible fairness. That means, if there is exculpatory evidence, share what you can through established channels. If there's inculpatory evidence, pursue it regardless of the political weather. If a president's allies are implicated, show the same zeal you'd show for his critics. If his critics are implicated, show the same restraint you'd show for his friends. The point is not to reverse the weaponization of justice, but to remove it. So what should have happened today? A few simple commitments that don't compromise real cases, a timeline for producing responsive records to the committee, a willingness to facilitate an in-camera viewing of any recordings, if they exist, an Inspector General review of charging and declination decisions that raise concerns, and a written explanation of any ethics consultations the AG promised during confirmation. None of this is radical. It's basic governance. And yes, let's name the political tactic we saw deployed repeatedly, deflection by personalization. Apologize to Trump. That line tries to relocate the center of gravity from public evidence to personal loyalty. Democrats reject that framing because the rule of law isn't about protecting anyone's pride. It's about protecting the public's rights. If transparency vindicates people, good, let the sunlight in. If transparency reveals wrongdoing, good, let accountability follow. Either way, the process, not the personality, wins. If you take nothing else from this hearing, take this. Democracies don't collapse when a single question goes unanswered. They weaken when unanswered questions become a governing model. Today's evasions weren't random, they formed a pattern. The remedy isn't louder partisanship, it's disciplined oversight, documented facts, and an Attorney General who treats Congress not as an enemy, but as a co-equal branch. If you believe the Justice Department should serve the Constitution instead of any one politician, stay engaged. Call your representatives and ask them to insist on document production and Inspector General review. Support watchdog journalism that exposes what officials won't answer under oath. Share this analysis with someone who thinks oversight is just political theater and ask them a simple question. If there's nothing to hide, why not show the evidence? Subscribe to Progressive Pulse for reporting that teaches as it informs. We'll keep doing the unpopular but necessary work, reading the footnotes, tracing the timelines, and separating the talking points from the paper trail, so you can see not just what happened, but why it matters.